Hello, my name is Sarah Backley. I'm Associate Director at the British Chamber of Commerce in Japan. Today, we are welcomed by Jeremy Sampson, Managing Director of Robert Walters Japan. And to give you a little bit of context behind the interview today, as we all know, the past 18 months have really seen huge changes and acceleration in most parts across industries in Japan and globally. And amongst that, I would say a leader in the force of recruitment is Robert Walters. So Jeremy, the pandemic has really opened people's eyes to a new way of working in Japan. How would you say COVID has affected the working styles here?
I would say that the pandemic has definitely set off what has been the world's largest work from home or remote work experiment. And it's really challenged traditional working styles in Japan. So as many people know, Japan is typically a very traditional work approach. But interestingly, upon the beginning of the pandemic, we ran a survey and we found that around 80% of companies were able to adapt and actually offer remote work or work from home in a fairly short period of time. Interestingly though, a year later, when we ran a similar survey, we found that 95% of companies were able to adapt and were offering some sort of work from home and flexible work arrangements. So I think work from home has largely been quite successful. It's gone well for most companies. And it's proven that work doesn't need to be tied down to the office, which has definitely traditionally been the case, especially here in Japan. So we've also really seen a paradigm shift in the expectations from employees. Today, it's the flexibility and the ability to work from home has become the number one priority for most employees.
Right. And these companies that were involved in the survey, are they Japanese companies or international as well?
These are predominantly our clients, which would consist of foreign companies operating in Japan or more global Japanese companies.
And how would you say COVID has affected the interview process?
So yeah, not surprisingly, we've seen a huge shift to online interviews throughout the pandemic, and I think that they're very much here to stay. I think in-person interviews will come back to some degree, but online interviews are always going to be a part of the process moving forward. But having said that, it's really important to ensure that there's a high level of engagement through the interview process, and these online interviews can in some way really dehumanize the process. So, especially for employees when they're looking for the right cultural fit and place to work, it's really important to engage the candidates in person. And so in-person interviews, especially throughout the final stages of the process, are still very much important.
Well, I know at Robert Walters you run many a survey throughout the year. What are some of the key insights that you found throughout COVID?
Some of the ways how companies assess productivity and monitor performance throughout the pandemic. So what we found is still a lot of companies are basing it on the work output or the number of tasks completed. Many still rely on the hours of work put in and more traditional approaches. But we are seeing more companies taking a more KPI, more progress towards more results-based assessment. With regards to onboarding, we found from our surveys that more than 80% of respondents were actually very satisfied with the onboarding process. Conversely, interestingly, more than a third of new employees joining companies were actually unsatisfied with that online training and development. So there was a little bit of a contrast there between what employers and employees were experiencing once onboarded. So the other interesting fact we found was that professionals, even in the height of the pandemic, were still quite confident about job opportunities available in their market. We saw that even throughout the pandemic, 60% of employees expressed some intention to change jobs within the next 12 months. And we're actually starting to see that come through a little bit now. And talking about remote work and flexibility is interesting. I mentioned that many companies have made the adaptation, but there's still many companies that haven't. And interestingly, from our surveys, that the companies that weren't able to adapt or didn't take on remote work or work from home, the reason being, in 43% of those cases, was the preference of the senior management team. So this just goes to show that there's really still some very much conservative mindset around the work from home and flexibility in the workplace.
So moving on to the candidate side of things, what changes have you seen in what the candidates are looking for?
Yeah, we've actually seen a huge shift in priorities among professionals throughout the pandemic. And we actually ran a survey of over 4,000 employees last year. And interestingly, the thing that came out of this is what employees value the most in an employer. And what came out was having colleagues and a work culture that inspires them to do their best. We've also found that the expectation of flexibility, as I mentioned earlier, it's really gone from being a benefit to an expectation of employees. And also employees are really looking for a compelling vision and purpose for the company. They're not just looking for a job, they're looking to be a part of something that's bigger than them. So I guess not surprisingly too, one of the other important points was really the approach that the employer has taken towards the pandemic and how they've treated their people. So having a real people first approach, taking care of the health and well-being of their employees first, and really being transparent throughout the pandemic has also been something that employees have really valued. So these points are key not only to attracting new talent, but they're also really key to maintaining and retaining existing staff.
So everything that you've just mentioned there around the changing needs of candidates, that I'm sure can be applied globally, really. But specifically in Japan, what would you say are some of the key pitfalls that foreign companies fall into?
I think one of the biggest pitfalls that companies fall into when recruiting in Japan, especially companies new to Japan, is not grasping the gravity of the talent shortage. So they often base their expectations on experiences in other countries or in headquarters. Really don't really appreciate just how difficult it is to find the right people here in Japan. Another challenge I think is that sometimes there's a little bit too much emphasis put on the English skills of the candidates. So sometimes, great skills can be overshadowed by a shortage of English, or the other way around. Great English skills can often overshadow a lack of skills for a particular job. So it's important not to get too focused purely just on the English skills of a potential employee. I think, it's definitely important not to base your expectations on Japan based on your experiences in other countries. And also really failing to sell themselves as an employer, and the benefits of working for the company, the future vision of the company. These are things that are really, really important to potential employees in Japan and I think around the world. So it's important for companies to really sell themselves on that. And the other thing, I guess, pitfall is companies that don't really adapt to the local market, to local nuances, and localize.
So Jeremy, moving forward, do you think we can expect any more dramatic shifts in the hiring landscape in Japan?
I think remote interviews are definitely here to stay, as I mentioned earlier, but again, it's important to maintain that engagement throughout. Same with work from home, I think it's definitely here to stay to some degree. I think the jury is still out a little bit on these companies that are promising work from anywhere, anytime, forever. And so I think there's always going to be a place for the office to some degree for collaboration and culture. One thing we've also seen a lot is the increase of counteroffers and offer rejections. So companies are working a lot harder to try and keep employees when they resign and offering counteroffers to get them to stay. And we're also seeing a bit more of a lack of commitment from the candidate side too, because there's less connection and engagement throughout the interview process. They're not as committed through that process, and we're seeing a greater instance of offer rejections now also. I think it's largely due to a decrease in engagement compared to being in person. I think we'll continue to see an increase of the hiring of foreign talent in Japan, of course, hopefully when the borders here do open. And we'll also see a continued increase in the skill gap, especially when it comes to highly skilled professional technical skills, and of course, English skills also. We're also seeing, and we'll continue to see, I think, the hiring of more senior professionals, as well as more working mothers. So I think these are key to the labour market to help overcome that talent shortage. We're also seeing a number of initiatives by the Japanese government to attract investment, especially in the areas of semiconductor manufacturing, financial services, and they're also trying to attract more foreign executives to the Japan market. So I think we'll see movement in that direction further too.
So Jeremy, as Managing Director of Robert Walters Japan, what would you say is the role that Robert Walters can play in supporting British companies here in Japan?
We have a long history of supporting British companies in Japan, ranging from large multinationals through to small startups just entering the market. So with our 20 plus years of experience here in the Japanese market, we've got the knowledge and the expertise to help companies to really navigate the labour market and the hiring landscape here in Japan. So we produce market-leading materials from our annual salary survey to various other employer-employee surveys, white papers and articles. So we have a wealth of knowledge and market material that we can also provide. But ultimately, as one of the longest established and largest foreign recruitment firms in Japan, we have the broadest reach in the country and ultimately the access to the best talent pool here in Japan.
And how would people find you if they have questions, specifically to Robert Walters Japan? What's the best way of getting in contact with your team?
Sure, you can reach us directly through our website, or you can also find me and many of my team members on LinkedIn and be reached out directly.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I know you're a busy man. Thanks for sharing your insights, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Been a pleasure. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Jeremy.